I think.
Hi,
Go
Ali.
ahead. Hi, Lavi. Please go ahead.
Yes. So I thought we should start on time. Yeah. So good afternoon, everyone, and good morning and good evening for those of you who may be joining us from different time zones today. Welcome to Recalibrate's Are You Thinking Beyond the Seed Innovation Mentoring webinar. I would like to thank all the participants that have joined us today. We appreciate you taking the time to be with us. By way of introduction, my name is Lavendra De Silva. I am one of the managing partners of Recalibrate and head of its sales advisory practice. Just as a little introduction to Recalibrate, our innovation mentoring practice helps companies assess and develop innovative mindsets, institute state-of-the-art ideation techniques, and most importantly, we help companies set up proper innovation management processes, which allows them to bring ideas through ideation into incubation and implementation. So that's what we do in the innovation mentoring practice. Let me quickly introduce Eli Etin, partner at Recalibrate and head of our innovation practice. Eli is joining us from Israel this afternoon. He's an Australian expat who is very familiar with the Israeli innovation and startup ecosystem. He previously headed up organizational innovation at Amdocs. Eli now lectures at some of Israel's leading universities, teaches MIT's approach to design thinking, which is how I got to know Eli. He also teaches product development using SIT at Columbia's Business School. In addition to his academic responsibilities, Eli also consults globally with us on innovation management. Before we begin, I want to let you know that the QA feature is available throughout the webinar today. You can use it to send us questions at any time. We have some time allocated at the end to answer as many of these questions as we can. You can use the chat feature to communicate any technical issues you're experiencing. With that, let me hand you over to Eli. Eli, it's all yours.
Wonderful, Lavi. Thank you so much for that warm introduction. And thank you to those who have joined us both live and who are watching this on the recorded version. We're going to jump straight into a little quiz, and let me give you the background for that quiz. Back in the late 1960s, the NASA Space Agency had a challenge. How do they find the most creative engineers for the NASA space program? For this, they got the services of a certain Dr. George Land, and Dr. George Land created a number of questionnaires to test for high creativity. This is not the interesting part of the story. What's interesting is that he decided to modify those questions and test creativity or high creativity in children. So the first group of children that he tested, he took 600 kids from the ages of 3 to 5 and tested them for high creativity. I want to see if you can hazard a guess at what percentage of those showed high creativity. Is it less than 25, 25 to 50, 50 to 75, or more than 75%? You have that in your little pop-up. So if you can just click on what you think is the correct answer and just click submit, and we'll have a look at how well that matches reality. And hopefully I'll see the results as well. So let's have a look. You can see this with me. The majority of you said that it was between 50 and 75%, with a 75% of you thinking it was more than half. So it's nice to see that you're cautiously optimistic. The answer will probably astound you. It was almost everybody. We're talking here about 98% of the children exhibited high creativity. He then came back to those same 1,600 children a number of years later, 7 years later roughly, and he tested them again. Let's have another little pop-up quiz, and let's see if you guys can have a think about what was the percentage this time. So just have a quick look. Was it less than 25, 25 to 50, 50 to 75, or more than 75? Just click on that and click submit, and let's have a look at your answers. It's actually quite interesting to see this being done via via the Zoom tool and not in a front face-to-face like we're used to. So I can see here the majority of you are saying it's between 25 and 50, and you are absolutely right. So it was actually down to a mere 30%. Now, we're not going to quiz you any further, just to say that if you are optimistically thinking that somehow this trend got reversed, then you are indeed to be commended for being an optimist, because it doesn't get reversed. It actually gets worse. It falls down to only 12% at the age of 15. And by the time these 1,600 children reached adulthood, around the age of 18 to 21, what George Land discovered was that it fell down to a mere 2%. So very sobering, and I don't think it actually necessarily got better over the years since then. For those of you who are interested, there's a great TEDx that Dr. George Land does about this. He calls it the failure of success, and he basically speaks about how non-creative behavior is learned. So unfortunately, our schools, they don't really teach children, students, how to question what they're being taught. They are much more focused, for the most part, on teaching kids to give the correct answer. That's the most important thing, giving the correct answer and not straying from the boundaries. So in terms of the agenda, what we will see is we will connect that, what we just saw, the experiment that he conducted and the survey that he did, we will connect that to innovation culture, and we'll see that we can actually break that, right? We can provide our employees with tools to regain and reconnect to their creativity whilst creating an innovation management structure that will help us go from creativity to innovation. And that process of going from creativity to innovation and from innovation to, well, we'll see in a moment. I don't want to give any spoilers away. We're going to look at how that's done. So we're going to have a look at who's responsible, why it's important, and then most importantly, how do we get that? How do you get innovation to be a systematic part of your company? And we will look at the two main aspects of that, right? The infrastructure, what I call the earth that the seeds need to grow in, and the tools and programs, or the, if you like, the water and nutrients and sun and this entire program of the correct environment, right? To help our ideas actually turn into more than just ideas. We will look at an example of success, and we'll finally end up with some Q&A. So hopefully jot your questions down. If you have some questions, I'll be very happy to hear what your questions are, and especially how they relate to the area of business that you are in. I want to start with another true experiment. This time, again, from the 60s. You'll find that a lot of interesting experiments took place in the 60s. Probably wouldn't be allowed today due to the protection of animal rights. But this is what happened. They took 3 chimpanzees, hadn't fed them for a number of days, and the scientists placed them into a room. Now, there were bananas hanging from the ceiling of the room, and there was a chair in the corner. And of course, the alpha male monkey, the most powerful monkey in the group, the innovative monkey, went and grabbed the chair to try and take the bananas. Now, what happened at this point was that a little window opened, and a rubber hose with the very strong stream of cold water punished that monkey that tried to get the bananas. But more interestingly is it punished all of the monkeys. It punished all of the chimpanzees, in effect known as collective punishment. If any of the chimpanzees tried again, they were all again collectively punished. So what did the chimpanzees learn? Well, I hear you say they probably learned that we shouldn't try and go for the bananas, and you're absolutely right. Now, this is where it gets interesting. They took one of the chimpanzees out and brought in a new chimpanzee. That new chimpanzee was also hungry and didn't experience the water punishment. And when that chimpanzee obviously tried to grab the bananas, do you know what happened? Well, those of you who guessed that the other chimpanzees ganged up and beat that poor chimpanzee up, you'd be absolutely right. And what happened is that they would take out, each time they would take out one chimpanzee and replace them with a new hungry chimpanzee, until at the very end of the experiment, they had three chimpanzees, and they were hungry. They wanted to get the bananas, and yet none of them would try and take the bananas. which is quite amazing because none of them actually went through the initial punishment of the cold water. Now, if you were to turn to these cute but hungry chimpanzees and say, my dear simians, why are you not taking the bananas, right? And why are you attacking any new chimpanzee that will try and do it? And what do you think they'll say? They will say, well, thank you for asking us this question, but that's simply just the way things are around here. It's the way it's always been. We can't even tell you how it started. And that's something that happens, unfortunately, across many companies where there is a culture that does not encourage innovation, to say the least, and sometimes actively discourages innovation. And one of the as a result of this experiment, one of the techniques that managers have started employing, and something that I recommend to our clients at Recalibrate we work with on innovation, is to ask newly employed workers, new employees, whether they're a junior or senior, whatever level they're at, to keep a diary, to write within that diary everything that happens that they find are the bananas that are not taken. So you know, what procedures are out of place of reality? What steps are no longer relevant? Because culturally, if there is a culture of not questioning past activities, that's never going to get questioned, and opportunities will be missed because of that. And you will get a lot of information by interviewing them a few weeks later, and you got to do it fairly quickly before these new employees and managers adopt the prevailing culture, and are also no longer able to see this behavior as anything strange.
So I think, Eric, this is a great point that you've made. I think it really dovetails into this whole concept that we've worked on at Recalibrate, with the power of mindsets on innovation, having the right mindsets being a key aspect of having an enabling innovation culture within the company. So great, that's a really good story.
Absolutely, thank you, Lavi. Do not try it at home, by the way. They when they get hungry, they can get quite violent. So I strongly recommend you don't do that. So we're talking about creativity and innovation. Let's quickly see if we can define that. Right, there's plenty definitions for creativity. One of my favorite definitions is from Albert Szent-Györgyi, 1937 Nobel Prize winner in the field of medicine and physiology. For those of you who take vitamin C in the winter, please say a big thank you to Albert Szent-Györgyi for coming up with the formula to synthesize vitamin C. And he said the following. He said, creativity is the ability to look at whatever it is that everyone else is looking at, but to see and as a result also think something different. So having that creative spark. But is that enough for innovation? And I'll give you a clue, it is not. And Lavi, I can hear you typing in the background. And what we can see is that in innovation, it's not enough to have ideas. So what else do we need in that case? We need to definitely have the creative ideas, but we also need implementation. This is when I ask my MBA students how they go from creativity to innovation. They almost always get this part right, the need to implement. What they often miss, and what is strange because it's so key, is this final step, and that's the need to create value. Right. So if you're having creativity and you implement it, but there's no value, then my friends, ladies and gentlemen, you don't unfortunately have innovation. So we will look at how to do that. We will look at how we journey in this journey through ideation to incubation and to incubation and finally implementation of ideas in order to create that value. And that concept of going from creativity to value is very important in innovation. And it's also important because a lot of people who are perhaps maybe not actively involved in innovation, for many of those people, innovation simply equates to product and service innovation, whether that's revolutionary or evolutionary, right? Where there is a small improvements or a major change that they believe it should only really apply to products and services, and often people confuse R&D with innovation. The point I want to stress here is that innovation is not only possible, but is absolutely necessary and required in areas, especially in business model, when you have startups coming up around enterprises, changing the business model. You can see that so well. We all know how Airbnb is the largest hotel company without a single asset in hotels, similar with Uber and its competitors, and similar with many of these marketplace startups, how the business model has been completely changed, and that really has hurt incumbents. So we want to make sure that we are aware of the ability that we can make innovation in the business model, in internal processes. This can lead to major cost savings and improvements, and also bring innovation into the way the management works and in how we do marketing and sales.
Great, Eddie. I think this is a key point here. Many people, I know from our survey as well, that many people focus on just product and service innovation and not on the other aspects of innovation. That was a clear in the India Innovation Climate Survey. So good point here.
Agreed. So when we speak about innovation management, what are we really talking about? So I want to just clarify this point. I'm sorry. I just want to make sure I move that so you can all see that. So we're going to go into detail about how this is actually done. But in terms of innovation management, you want to create a culture and an environment where you know, whether you're innovation managers or you are working with the innovation manager and leading this in the company, you want to make sure that you understand where the barriers are to innovation. You're probably familiar with such statements as "not invented here" and other excuses for not doing innovation. What we want to do, and I'll show you how that's done, is to make sure that, for example, if employees want to submit ideas and take part in innovation and in internal innovation in the company, they should not be met with the barriers of their immediate managers, and that usually we find that's the major barrier, right? We want to get into a situation where they can bypass that and don't even need to ask for permission. And we'll see how through the right infrastructure we can create that environment. We can't ask our employees to be innovative and to bring positive change in the company unless we train them. So the whole concept of providing them with the right tools through skilling them up and giving them those capabilities and innovation is also super important. With clients that I work, we aim for specific targets that within 3 to 4 years we will cover. This is specifically true for enterprise companies with tens of thousands plus of employees. We will make sure that every single person in the company, no matter what their job is, receives the basic innovation training, and then those courses get more advanced for people who want to take part. So democratizing innovation and making it open to everybody is very important, of course, and that leads me to the next point of ensuring that there is local innovation, especially true for multinationals, nationals, and regional companies in India and outside. When you're geographically spread, when you have your people sitting with the client, whether you're helping provide professional services or product development, you want to make sure that you're doing innovation at each one of those spots and not just at headquarters. And finally, we will speak a little bit about reward and recognition. Super important to not only reward your innovators, but also provide them with the right recognition and incentives and publicize that. So often people ask me, they say, Ellie, so who should be taking part in innovation? Is it, do I need to find the geniuses? Do I need to find the creative geniuses and get them to supply the ideas? Well, you'd be surprised. That was actually the attitude till about a decade ago, when a major turnaround was made. And the turnaround said that it is not the correct approach to keep it limited to a few people. You can identify specific, and you should identify specific people to help in the innovation process, and we'll speak about innovation champions in a moment, but really you need to make sure the entire company is involved and has equal access to innovation. Role of management is super important in terms of providing strategy from the top down and providing support and budgeting. And employees, of course, are our major asset here. This is who we are relying on to solve the problems, to bring us ideas, and then finally, as we will see in some examples, to create that value. Now, the innovation manager or the team, which was the role that I held for quite a number of years before joining Recalibrate and consulting, needs to be a very lean team. We're talking about a few people per thousands of employees, and we are not asking them to come up with the ideas. We're asking the innovation manager and team to drive the process. So that's quite important, and that collaboration, as we'll see, between the innovation manager and the rest of the company, especially heads of HR and O&D and learning and development, are also super important. So for HR leaders in companies, this is a very, very important area. Of course, our innovation can and should increase revenues. We see that continuously with, for example, with Alphabet, when they are bringing in new innovations that add to the bottom line. They help us to decrease costs. This is also quite obvious. If we are able to improve processes and shorten them, they will do that as well. Increase productivity through tools, right? So we're not only developing products and services, we're also developing internal tools for better productivity and collaboration. And most importantly, innovation is a double-edged sword. If you do it right, you will get positive externalities. You will attract the best employees. You will be able to retain them, and you'll save costs on doing that as well. If you do it wrong, well, guess what? The opposite will happen, right? So it's a double-edged sword, and that's why innovation management is so crucial. So
Eddie,
go ahead, please.
Yeah, I think a really important point that you made earlier. I just want to make sure the participants heard it clearly. I think the difference here is we've seen many times with our clients at Recalibrate that just having ideas percolate is just not enough. So that's why the emphasis here on thinking beyond the seed. So innovation management, which is what we're talking about here, is a really crucial step. That's how we get ideas into products or services or new business models or new processes. So that's the key, and I think that's the main point that you're making here.
Thank you, Lavi, for reiterating that. So I don't know about the rest of you. I'm actually fond of. I have a bit of a green thumb. I'm fond of gardening. I'm not a farmer, but I grow various herbs for my wife's cooking, and I found that surprisingly, even if I take the best seeds, whether they're tomato seeds or seeds for mint or for other plants and vegetables and herbs, and I just throw them into a sandpit. What's the chances of anything growing there? Well, I would say pretty close to zero. And that's why leaders shouldn't be surprised even if they come up with the best ideas, the best seeds, if they just throw them into a sandpit, come back a few months later and say, well, nothing grew. So obviously internal innovation doesn't work. So obviously that's very silly. We want to make sure that those ideas, those seeds have the fertile earth, the infrastructure they need to grow. And of course that they receive the water, the light, the nutrients, and the environment is controlled and right for those seeds to grow into plants and produce their fruit and vegetables and value for us. And we're going to have a look at how that's done right now in the how section. So I like to use that metaphor. I'd like to think of the earth here as the innovation infrastructure in which everything will grow, whereas my innovation tools and programs are the water, the nutrients, the sunlight, all the elements I need to give to encourage that growth. So let's have a look at what that actually means. And what we can say with certainty is that this infrastructure we're creating falls into two sections. It falls into a human part, and it falls into a technical part. From a human side, we've already mentioned how important upper management support is and direction, and how that needs to be also communicated, right, by the ICOM team, the internal communication in that company. With clients, I always recommend to actually videotape the CEO or the CTO in a message before campaigns, to videotape them when innovation is launched in the company, to show that senior leadership is behind it. Innovation champions, as we said, also very important. These are the liaisons throughout the company that help the innovation managers on a voluntary basis, right? So they do a few hours a week on top of their jobs. Portal is super important to have a place to concentrate. When I work with my clients, there are a number of portals that we at Recalibrate recommend, and it's very important to make sure that this is actually implemented. Otherwise, ideas will get lost and be no way of doing a BPM, a business process management of those ideas. And the right tools can actually not only speed up the process, they can also give you much greater management of it. Gamification, you're all familiar with. We use that with a stock market model in the campaign management system to encourage people to and to reward people to take part. And with training and enrichment, I really want to stress here how important it is to ensure that training and enrichment is provided across the board throughout the entire company, to everybody in innovation, even at the most basic level, right? So people get a taste of that, because often frontline employees, lower level employees, factory and production and blue collar employees are overlooked when it comes to innovation training, and junior staff are overlooked. And innovation training is something that seems to be kept predominantly as a present or some kind of a bonus to managers. And you can see here 58% of training based on our survey was directed at managers and above. This is not how it should be, and it really should be for everybody. In terms of the best practice of the innovation team, so if you wanted to get an innovation team for a company with tens of thousands or even thousands of employees, you will still want it to be a very lean team. Of course, here is an example of an innovation team for a company of around 30 employees, headed by VP Innovation reporting to the CTO, a dedicated marketing manager to promote innovation both internally to employees as well as externally to customers and partners, and an innovation manager, innovation evangelist to head internal innovation, and an open innovation manager with staff reporting to them that will take care of all the work with startups and academic institutes. Of course, not to forget the incubation manager, Lavi, because without that, we will not be able to move things into internal incubation. Please go ahead.
Yes, sorry, there was actually another key point. I think recently, I think there's a significant number of participants who have an HR background. I think HR is going through a tumultuous period of change and transformation, lots of automation coming in, traditional roles are shifting, which also creates opportunity, I think, for people in that role. And I think innovation needs HR involvement in a very significant way. It also opens up a new position or new place for HR to move into, which is to drive innovation and be part of this innovation infrastructure. What do you think of that?
So I think that's such an important point. You know, because innovation manager is going to be the equivalent of the HR or the finance or the legal manager. It's going to be a management role that's absolutely necessary in that company. The question will be, where will it sit, and who will it work with? And even if it sits under the CTO in that area, it will still need full cooperation and collaboration with HR, but it doesn't have to sit there. It can actually sit within the HR structure, because it's such a combination of soft and hard skills, and it's so much across the company. I'll give you one quick example. If I'm asking the employees in your organization, and I'm speaking here to our participants who have joined us. If you go and ask them, listen, we would love for you to provide ideas, to participate in innovation, to invest a bit of your time in helping innovation in the company, but we don't coordinate with HR to check whether they're actually doing that, right, in their yearly review, and to reward them for doing that or chastise them for not doing enough. In other words, if it's not a priority for HR, single incentive. So for the innovation manager, it's absolutely crucial to work very closely with HR to make sure that both OD, HR provide and L&D provide all the right skills to the employees, but also provides them with the right incentives for that. So I hope that answers your question, Lavi.
Yes, thanks, Eli. Great.
Pleasure. A few quick words about measurement. So did you know that I'll just see if I can move that here to the side, 62% of respondents said that their organizations, this is based on the India Innovation Climate Survey that was done very, very recently this year, they do not have any metrics to measure innovation, which to me is amazing. It's mind-blowing. How can you know where you're going in terms of innovation if you don't even know where you're coming from, if you've never set a baseline, if you're not measuring such important aspects, not only for ROI, but also for innovation, employee satisfaction, innovation, customer satisfaction, production of patents, what percentage of people go through training. And another strong recommendation we always recommend to our clients is be transparent. Make sure that all this information is available to everybody in the company via the innovation portal. And not only will you show that you are transparent and you'll be able to show the success as you successfully increase your KPIs and meet them, but you'll also be able to create competition between the various departments by showing them by line of business or by department and actually creating a competitive environment, which is a great environment for innovation. Final word about infrastructure before we move into programs and tools, and that is the whole idea of reward and recognition. So studies that we've conducted and other studies that we have looked at have all shown the same thing. So if I was to ask you what's more important as a motivator, recognition or reward, when by reward we mean financial or financially based reward, you may be surprised that actually recognition is a much stronger motivator. We want to, if you have the opportunity to get a few extra hundreds of dollars for submitting a winning idea, or to meet the CEO and be presented with a prize on stage in front of the entire company, whether it's live or there with the audience with you, much stronger motivated to be able to put on your resume that you created a startup within the company and led that to success and to become a new line of business than just to have a few extra hundreds of dollars in your pocket. By the way, it doesn't mean that you can't combine it, but the recognition side is absolutely crucial, and also to ensure that the employees in your companies are not afraid to fail. This is where the first penguin principle comes in. We actually ran a program where we awarded, rewarded or recognized with a special certificate internal startups that fell within one of the clients we worked with. And I can tell you right now that program was a complete failure. We actually failed with that program, and we had to look for other ways because nobody wanted to get an award for failure, no matter how nicely we put it and how much we said it wasn't their fault. So that's the summary of the innovation infrastructure. Any comments, Slavi, before I move into tools and programs?
No, I think that was great, Eli. I think it's key now that we move beyond and see, okay, now what do we do with the infrastructure that we have?
Wonderful. So let me take you into a concept you probably have heard quite a bit about, and we can define it. And this concept is ideation. Now, for those of you who've read my article, Think Beyond the Seed, you know that I'm not a huge fan of brainstorming. In fact, I think brainstorming can be a complete waste of time if the session is done in an unstructured manner without taking care of specific safeguards, for example, to make sure that the shy also have an opportunity and to make sure that politics is taken out. So when people look at ideation, there are two ways of looking at it. The short definition number 2, are specific tools and methodologies for getting ideas, for generating ideas, and we will look at them. And the higher definition, if you like, is to see it as an end-to-end process. So ideation isn't simply coming up with the idea, but it's also understanding what the real challenges are, and that whole process of managing ideas from the challenge that creates them to selecting the best ideas and prototyping them, and finally into green light and incubation. That is the if you like, the other way of looking at ideation is an end-to-end process. And you can see that here, right, in this funnel, where we start with an ecosystem of ideas, a universe where ideas can come from, whether they're internal or external, and we take them through various gateways, match them up to specific challenges, or drive them through specific challenges. So for example, one of the clients I work with had a challenge for increasing environmental corporate social responsibility. So we did a campaign with them whereby they would get ideas specifically from any employee in the company throughout the world. They could write in specific ideas for how to improve environmental corporate social responsibility to the company. And some great ideas came out of that, were implemented, but of course they had to go through these gateways, right? And that's what we'll talk about. How do we get them there? So two major tools. I like to see these as flip sides of the same coin, are design thinking and inside the box, or SIT. Design thinking, if you haven't heard of it yet, I strongly recommend you look into it. And we may even run a design thinking webinar in the future. It really is crucial to be familiar with this technique, because it goes out specifically to understand the needs of customers and other stakeholders. It has very interesting take on who the users are and how to get information from extreme users. And it's a very iterative and fast way. By fast, I don't mean hours, I mean days or potentially weeks, depending on how long it's done. So it's very, very powerful methodology in innovation, specifically in ideation. SIT developed here in Israel in the mid-1990s by Professor Jacob Goldenberg, who was also my professor at university for my MBA and teaches together with me at Columbia. Came up with this system that is, in fact, very much a quick win. Within a couple of hours, you can apply the templates within thinking inside the box to come up with very innovative ideas to solve those challenges. Some other tools that we like to employ. And by the way, I want to make a point here that there are a number of competing tools, and at each stage of the innovation funnel, at each gateway, to get to each gateway, there are different ways of doing that, and with different tools. And a good innovation manager or innovation consultant should be all of the situation. For example, if you're very short on time and you want to, the time of your think tanks is super important, perhaps because it contains very senior people, you can do something like thinking inside the box and generate ideas there within a very, very short period of time. So time, budget, and challenges will drive, and the stage you're at, right, will drive that choice of tool. And that's why innovation managers really need to be familiar with all these different tools that are available, whether they be employee crowdsourcing campaigns, where we ask employees to give us ideas for specific challenges, whether they are the use of innovation pitch-offs, right, where shortlisted teams create pitches to convince managers and employees to vote for them. Hackathons, I'm sure you're all familiar with, another great way to generate ideas and prototypes and generate a lot of positive buzz within the company. And there's an opportunity to work both internally and with external units, external resources, like often PhD students or perhaps even customers, and marketplace events where people can walk around. And what we do is we give our clients, for marketplace events, we make sure the employees receive electronic wallet applications, and with that electronic wallet, they can walk around and invest in different ideas. And we use that investment of the electronic dollars to see which companies are getting the high vote, and that's one of the factors that we use. My final point is patents. You may think, well, this is obvious, Ellie. Patents are a part of the innovation process, but you'd be surprised it's not always obvious for everyone. Whenever we start an ideation ideation, end-to-end ideation process, no matter what the challenges are, we always make sure that our customers either we bring their patent manager to give a talk or to videotape them and present that, or we bring someone externally, because it's very important not to miss the opportunity to generate patents during the ideation process. That leads us to the final part that I want to talk about. If you have a look at that funnel, have a look at gate 3. At gate 3, we've got a number of shortlisted ideas, or perhaps even just a single idea, or again, depending on budget that the company has provided for incubation. Best practice is to have a number of ideas sitting inside incubation at different stages of incubation, so you always have ideas coming in and out of this innovation funnel or innovation pipeline. You'd actually, another thing that surprised me, Lavi, and ladies and gentlemen, is when I saw the result that 65% of respondents said that there was no incubator program, no internal incubator program inside the company, and there was no plans to set up such a program in the organization. So that's definitely something that companies need to think about, because if you just concentrate on getting the idea or just getting the seed, and you don't know how to transfer it into growth, then it's wasted. Actually, I had companies that I was working with, and they said, and when we first met and we talked about their plans, they said, well, we're just gonna have a hackathon, we're gonna have a campaign, and we're gonna gather ideas and make sure we get the best ideas. And I said, that's great that you're doing that. What are your plans for the day after? How do you plan to greenlight those ideas, and do you have an incubation system set up? And really, these figures do reflect what I've seen with customers as well, and that most of the time companies are not prepared for the day after ideation. Hot housing, I'm not going to go into the details of it, but those of you who are interested, it's a very powerful tool for shortening the time spent for greenlighting winning ideas from what is normally months, 3 to 6 months in most large enterprises, by which time the idea is either irrelevant or the people have left or the competitors have beat you to it, shortening it to simply a day or a day and a half using the agile methodology and agile approach of creative sprints, and minimizing also the impact on the time of senior leaders and managers. So you can see that here. Any comments? I think you wanted to ask something before we move into our final example of success, Lavi?
No, I think we should do the final example of success, Ellie, and then take questions. I think there's already 4 waiting for you. So
wonderful.
Great.
Wonderful. So I'm going to quickly finish this off. I think we can definitely do the 4 questions in the time remaining. And obviously, we are very much encouraging your questions. That's the best way we find to learn is afterwards to do a good Q&A session. So I want to give you an example of one of our clients at Recalibrate that we worked with. That's a large high-tech company that went on an innovation campaign across the company and didn't limit the ideas to either products or services, but said, hey, it can be anything from whether it's product to service area or business model or internal tools. And you may be surprised, the winning idea was not a sexy new feature for an existing product. It wasn't a new service. It was actually an internal tool for speeding up implementation. What this done is it cut execution time for implementation by 60%, and it saved the company millions of dollars, because now they were finally meeting their SLAs and not paying large SLA penalties as they were doing before. So that was a fascinating way of creating value, but not necessarily creating it via new products and services. And I think that brings us to the end, and I'm happy to take questions. So just remember, to get innovation management happening in the company, it's not a trivial matter, and it does need to be managed. It can't simply be left to good luck and to having a few innovation events throughout the year. You really do need to create the ground, the earth that will get those ideas, and you want to create an environment that will generate them and make sure that they're really relevant. And most importantly, they will move the best ideas through the ideation process into an incubation period and come out with new products, new services, new features, new processes, new lines of business, and new business models throughout the company to bring real value to that company. And I think that brings us to the end, and where I'm happy to go through Q&A now. Just before we begin, I do want to say, if you do have additional questions or want to provide feedback, you're more than welcome. We actually encourage your questions and your feedback. I as a lecturer, I have a weakness for questions. I actually enjoy answering questions and seeing people learn. So this is something to keep in mind, and we will make sure that those are answered. You can do that via the insights@recalibrate.world email address, or by contacting Vishal on the number you see below. So let's do the Q&A in the 10-12 minutes, I think it's what it says on my watch that we have left.
Eli, do you have access to the questions available right now? Can you see them in your Q&A?
So I'm going to click on my Q&A button, and I can see that there are 5 questions here. And now I'm going to go through these questions. This is great. So the first one is from an anonymous attendee, and they are asking, what is the most difficult step for an organization to start the innovation journey? That is a great question. I can tell you that, especially in organizations where innovation was not managed properly, as I said before, it's a double-edged sword. What often happens when it wasn't managed properly and there were just a few events that were not carried through, often these organizations actually have a negative attitude towards internal innovation and a lot of cynicism. So that's quite a big hurdle to overcome. We recommend and we work with our clients to make sure that, firstly and most importantly, in terms of that difficult step to overcome, we get upper management support. Without support from C-levels, from CEO and C-level in the company for a serious strategic approach to innovation management, it will always stay at a tactical level and never really bring value. So if you can overcome that difficult step of getting upper management support, commitment, resourcing, budgeting, internal venture capital fund for for development of startups, then the whole journey becomes a lot easier to do. I hope that answers the question. I'm going to move on to the next question. Lavi, if you have any comments or you want to say anything along the way, feel free. But I'm going to try and get through these before our time runs out.
Yeah, go ahead.
Question number 2, also from an anonymous attendee. How can Recalibrate help organizations get a buy-in from the? Oh, this is interesting. So this is great. This actually leads into from the previous question. How can Recalibrate help organizations get a buy-in from management to set up an innovation function? So this is something that we are quite experienced in. We're also experienced with the reasons or excuses that companies don't want to do innovation, or that. I'll give you an example. Many companies think that it's enough that if they need innovation, they'll simply buy a startup. Okay, they'll just buy their way into innovation. So by showing organizations that there is great value to be gained, and we have ways, we have numbers that show that it's not just ROI, but other KPIs that I talked about that show an increase in CSAT and ESAT, and an increase in overall branding and all the positive externalities over a fairly short period of time. And not just increased revenue, we can actually show that for the amount of money being invested in internal innovation, for a fraction of the cost of buying expensive startups and then losing the people because they leave, and usually because the PMI, the post-merger integration process, is not successful, and the startup founders leave, the company is just left with IP. So there are lots of compelling arguments and statistics to set up an innovation team and function and process within the company. I'm going to just go on to the next question. What is the time frame in which the organization can start seeing value of innovation? So 2 ways of answering that. I would say that that there is immediate value from innovation just when almost immediately, the moment, just by announcing that there is a program and there is a role, and of course continuously communicating that within the company, that first creates a big buzz within the company. So you can create that buzz of value fairly quickly, especially if you come in with the infrastructure beforehand. So people, when you come out with the announcements of your innovation program and the ideation campaign that will follow it, the infrastructure is in place. You have the managers in place, you have the working relationships established, and if you can do all that beforehand, you can start seeing value immediately. And in terms of seeing revenue and seeing direct and indirect financial value, then normally after a year and a half, we can start showing a major progress in developing, because you have to remember that it takes time to develop those ideas, take them through incubation, and implement them, pilot them, and make new businesses out of them, unless of course we're talking about tools, and that's also something that you can see immediate value in, because those are going to be used internally, including process changes. So I hope that answered your question, Mr. or Miss Anonymous. Next question is, what is an ideal size of an innovation team? Is there a thumb rule or a ratio of employees to innovation team to calculate manpower costs? Right, that's a great question. So there isn't actually a specific, if you like, answer to that, but the general answer I can tell you is that it's a very lean team. If you've got a few thousand employees, then normally 3 to 5 3 to 5 people in innovation maybe even be too many. I'd say for smaller large organizations, you can probably get away with under a dozen. Once you get to enterprise and multinational companies, you really want to make sure that you're not burning your innovation manager out by making them do everything, right? So definitely separate the functions of internal innovation and open innovation, and create specific roles, make sure that they get technical support. So there's someone who's a technical support and a marketing person there. And for very large corporations, I would say about a dozen, between 8 and a dozen would be a good number for getting that across. A question from Purnima. It's good to see you here, Purnima. How do we fine-tune the design thinking program for a specific category of the business? So thank you for the question, Purnima. Design thinking program, if you are running that inside or want to run that inside your companies, you can, the innovation manager should speak to the specific leaders in that business and find out what their needs are. So in effect, Purnima, what I would recommend is, as an innovation manager, you would be doing design thinking on the design thinking, right? So you would go and treat your design thinking program as your product and find out what the specific needs are. And so if you apply design thinking to creating your specific design thinking program, okay, I'm getting a little bit meta here, I think you'll find there's great value in that, and it will actually make everyone see that the tool is working almost straight away. Final question.
Sorry, let me, if I can interject a little bit.
Please do.
So, Purnima, also, I mean, we've worked in the past with you applying design thinking. Actually, there'll be a webinar forthcoming into the sales process, for example, which is a specific category, a specific area within or operation within a business. And yes, you can actually fine tune lots of design thinking principles within the sales process as well. So, we've done this in the past, and it's worked very well.
Thank you, Lavi, for filling in with that. So yes, absolutely, it's definitely something that can be done. It needs to be done, but again, that if you're going to run a design thinking program in the organization, for that program to be effective strategically and not just tactically, it needs to be part of an overall plan for innovation management. You can run the most successful design thinking program in the business, but if you haven't connected the dots between the various leaders in the company, you will find it harder to gain value from that program beyond an immediate tactical value, right? You'll find it hard to get strategic value of a program unless you're taking a strategic approach. And by the way, you can do that. You can definitely take a tactical approach and use that as a way in to a larger strategic management of innovation. Final question: is it easier for a startup or a big company to start innovating? So that's a great question. I can tell you again from experience, because I've also worked with not only internal startups, but I also have worked with just startups, helping them prepare and helping them get through using the right tools to make sure that they have a unique selling proposition and unique value. I can tell you that, again, when you say startup, it depends on what stage the startup is at. So the startup has a major advantage of being lean and being able to make decisions very quickly and very sharply, like a sharp speedboat. The large company is more of a big ship, and it's harder to turn it around. But in terms of innovating, you will find that most startups, especially if they're post-seed or post-round A startups, then innovation is part of their built-in culture. And we want to take the best practice tools that we've adapted for innovation with startups, and we want to implement them in the big company. And the advantage of the large company, of course, is budget and the ability to get the best people involved, and that choice, and also the time, right? Startups have to become profitable straight away. With large companies, you have a bit more time to bring that innovation in and make that revenue generating.
So I think, Eddie, I think the key, this question is a really interesting one for me. I think, what we've seen historically, and you answered this, and to amplify from my perspective, I think the mindsets, it is in the DNA. I think and we are finding this out more and more as we engage with clients all over the world, that you really do have to have the right mindset for innovation to take root. And startup seems to already have that, maybe because just going back to your chimpanzee example, they haven't been beat up over the years.
Right.
So they're fresh, they're new.
Absolutely.
They have a certain innocence to them.
And they wouldn't get to where they got. They wouldn't get that seed
Correct.
and that round A if they didn't have that. So there could be lots of startups who are trying to innovate, but they never get off the ground, and we never hear of them, right? We only hear of the successful ones. We don't hear of the ones that don't succeed.
Correct. So the answer is, it may be easier for a startup to start innovating. And I think the key of today's webinar was about how do you then take those great starts and make it a good ending. So the innovation management, I think, is where the challenge happens for startups. How do we sustain that? How do we mature that process as a kind of an engine?
Yeah, I couldn't say that better myself. I've actually worked with some late stage startups. I wouldn't even call them startups anymore. They've been in the market for 5 to 7 years. They were a startup when they started. They had very innovative ideas. Today, I can tell you one of the companies. Again, I'm not going to mention it by name, of course, but it's when it started, it had first mover advantage. Within 3 years, because there was no IP to protect it, there were 20 competitors that had popped up doing exactly what it was doing, and it's struggling today. It's really struggling to maintain that leadership position, and it's finding that what it took for granted as innovation, it cannot take for granted anymore, and it must start thinking in a strategic, innovative fashion to survive, right? To not have done to them what they did to the companies that they disrupted.
So well put. So Ellie, I think we've come to the end of the session. Unless there is a pending last question, we can take 30 seconds to answer one, but doesn't seem to be. So I will go ahead and want to thank Ellie for joining us from Israel. He makes frequent trips to India and the subcontinent and other places as well. So thanks again to all our participants for staying engaged and asking great questions. We value that. Look forward to bringing additional innovation mentoring webinar series throughout the upcoming year. And once again, on behalf of both Ellie and myself and the Recalibrate team, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much from here as well, and thank you, Lavi, for wonderful support throughout the webinar as well.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of the week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.